Good morning. Good morning. My name is Ashwin Dayal, and I lead the power work at the Rockefeller Foundation. And I'm really, really delighted to be able to kick off this morning with a panel discussion. You'll remember, for those of you who were with us yesterday, that we had a discussion on global cooperation in the context of the broad energy transition. This morning, we're going to, with our incredible group of panelists here, we're going to spend a bit of time sort of honing in on the question of global cooperation as we think about the theme of energy access. Now, these two themes are obviously intimately connected. They're not to be siloed, but it is worth remembering when we think about energy transitions, we have to ask ourselves, what are we transitioning from and to? There are 3.5 billion people in this world. That's half, roughly, a little less than half the population of the world, that we consider energy poor. What do we mean by that? They're consuming under 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita of electricity, which is what we describe as a sort of a modern energy minimum, the basic amount of electricity that you need to consume in order to participate in modern economic life, to be driving your lives, to be driving your livelihoods, and to be creating opportunities for sort of upward mobility for small businesses, for people in a context where they may otherwise not be able to take full advantage of the modern economy. We heard yesterday from Ravi and others about the 720, 750 million people who have no access to electricity. And we also heard that while these are extremely low-emitting parts of the world today, in a business as usual scenario where demand grows because it should, because people have to consume more to improve their lives, by 2050, that same community of 80 energy-poor countries and 3.5 billion people will be responsible for about 75% of global emissions. So clearly, this has to connect. The question of how we overcome energy poverty, how we address the question of energy access, has to connect to the question that we discussed yesterday on energy transitions. So we have a wonderful panel here today that represents colleagues who from the global community, from the UN system, from the private sector, from philanthropy, from civil society, and from government. So we couldn't be better represented with views across all of the sectors that we have. I'm going to start, therefore, with my friend and colleague Per Heggenes, who's the CEO of the IKEA Foundation. Now, Per, you made a remarkable decision as part of the IKEA Foundation back in 2020, 2021, when COVID was raging and we were actually seeing backsliding on energy access globally, to contribute and participate in this Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. So tell us a little bit about where you feel we've got to as we think about global cooperation on energy access 2 years on. What have we learned? What have you learned? And what are we starting to see on the ground as a result?
Thank you, Ashwin. Well, as you know, climate change is what keeps me awake at night. It's something that keeps my board awake at night. That's where we spend the majority of our money in the IKEA Foundation, because it's really an existential threat to humanity. And when we know that about 70% of the carbon emissions that goes into the air comes from energy production, what is a better place to be than to actually focus on how we can make this enormously important just transition from fossil fuel-based energy to renewable energy. A just transition is going to be extremely challenging for all of us. It's a thing that nobody can do alone. Carbon knows no borders. We need to work together. It will require a collaboration of radical purposes, dimensions, a kind of collaboration that we've never seen before. We need to bring all the different actors together. And what would be a better way to collaborate than to actually join something called the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which has the real focus on a very audacious goal, by the way, bringing renewable energy to 1 billion people in the global south. It's an audacious goal. It's a very motivating goal. It's a really exciting goal. And not only the fact that we bring energy to the many people who have no access to energy at all, or have limited access to energy or unreliable access to energy, By doing that, we will also eliminate thousands, maybe millions of diesel generators, and we will cut carbon emissions by several gigatons, which is just as important as the access to energy. And because we know that access to energy is probably the most important lever for creating jobs and building the economy in rural areas, the combination of these three goals for the Global Energy Alliance is just something we wanted to be part of. So this is the biggest bet that we ever made as a foundation. It's the biggest bet you made from Rockefeller as well, I think. And the opportunity to actually focus on doing something together to actually curb the climate change and get to a point where we can help people lift themselves out of poverty is for us a key focus of everything we do at the foundation. So, talk about the learnings. Well, 2 years into this, I think we're operating in 20 countries. It's just impressive the kind of progress we've been able to make in such a short amount of time. I think some of the learnings is that in order to create this enabling environment that's required with all partners together to drive an accelerated access to energy in a country requires a lot of insights into the different incentives, the different interests that the different partners have. So building an alliance is about getting everyone around the table, really understanding what are the drivers for action, how can we collaborate and drive this quicker together. And I think that learning is time-consuming because you need to invest in relationship, you need to invest in the time it takes to understand the different situations. And I think our team, the leadership team of GAP, our board, has done a remarkable job in actually making traction on that, working already in 20 countries around the world. So that's one learning. You know, this is difficult because you want to build a relationship and you want to actually act together. A second thing is really that after a couple of years, we've seen a couple of areas that really draws a lot of interest and attention from a number of the different alliance partners. And example of that will be the battery energy storage system, where we are currently looking at how can we bring different partners together, how can we actually create a consortium, how can we find ways to drive a quicker pipeline, expand the usage of battery, get the prices down, and make this available for many more countries and many more actors. I hope we can actually launch something at COP, this consortium. Another example is of what we're doing in those areas where there's no access to the grid, and we see a emerging opportunity to drive distributed renewable energy and building DRE for access to energy for people who otherwise wouldn't have any possibility. Now, this is a very fragmented market. There are lots of actors, but it's bits and pieces. We're trying to work together to bring some sense into it, get the best practices, get the best understand how we can make this work together, how we can drive pool procurement, how we can drive it faster and make it available. Build the evidence that's necessary for others to come in and invest. And the real benefit of being in an alliance like this is we can drive this blended finance model where we as a philanthropy can actually maybe de-risk an investment. We can make happen something that otherwise wouldn't happen. And that makes it very interesting for us as well, because we can leverage the very scarce philanthropic money in a way that otherwise wouldn't be possible. So an example of that would be, I just recently went to Ethiopia to see one of our programs. We call it a dream project. It's not the dream project, it's a dream project in Ethiopia, which is targeted to actually bring irrigation systems to rural areas and use irrigation as a way of creating jobs, driving agriculture. But at the same time, also by drilling boreholes and pumping the water with renewable energy, you bring energy to communities, you help set up small businesses, you drive productivity, you create jobs, and you have a sustainable and reliable agricultural system that otherwise wouldn't be the case. So GAP has the opportunity to actually make those investments, take those early pilot programs, invest in those programs, build the evidence, and then attract the big investors, the multilaterals to come in and scale this project. So in this case, we think about doing 200 microgrids in this area, which will then provide jobs for tens of thousands of people and benefits hundreds of thousands of people in that rural area. So that, to me, is a great example.
Great. No, thank you.
Can
Thank
I
you.
just say something,
Yeah,
finalize
please.
something? Because I think it's important that we keep in mind that access to energy is just half the story. Because if we don't work on the demand side, if we don't work on how we use the energy productively, how we make it possible for people to make money out of the energy access and therefore pay for the energy, how we actually drive a process towards finding more energy efficient appliances, we will miss an opportunity. Thank you.
100%. And I'm so glad that we are working and you are working on the access issue. And Sunita, maybe I'll change the order and I want to come to you, amongst many things that you have done over many, many years, and we've known each other a long time, you are now a COP28 advisory committee member, and it's just a month away. So I guess I want to ask you if you're seeing any signs of hope in terms of expanding global cooperation on energy access, on clean energy access. There's been a lot of talk about just energy transitions, which I think a lot of us feel must include this notion of energy abundance and energy poverty being addressed. What can we expect from COP, which is just about a month away?
So Ashwin, thank you for that question, and thank you, Per, for such a lot of work that you're doing as a foundation. Let me just take on what the ambassador said, and from that tell you what is the discussion at COP and the way ahead. The ambassador talked about the moral and the practical. And from my point of view, and I hope from many of our point of view, there is no practical unless there is moral. Because when it comes to climate change, the issue of affordability, the issue of access is absolutely determined by the fact that we create a framework in which large numbers of people who do not have access to energy, the wickedest problem in the world, particularly women, get access to energy. But they are not going to get access unless you accept the moral issue. And that is the big issue at COP today, Ashwin. As a member of the COP President's Advisory Committee, one of the things that I have been emphasizing is the fact that we will have to look at the financial issues more carefully, because we know today that the countries that need money are not getting it. We need renewable energy. We need to make the transformation in energy-starved countries. We can make the leapfrog, but that's not happening. And it's not happening because the money that is coming in the name of climate finance is loans, it is equity. It is adding to the debt burden of countries. So the big issue in front of COP today is to look at the moral issue of concessional finance, of grant finance. The issue of energy access gets tied to the issue of energy entitlement. Because if we talk about the world, we have run out of the carbon budget. And if we talk about 70% of the world population, which still does not have access to energy, we need to find the mechanisms that will bring those countries to energy security. But it's not going to happen without finance. The issue of DRE that you talked about, Per, one of the biggest issues there is the issue of affordability. We know that the energy question is about affordability. It's a wicked problem in the world, but the wickedest problem in the world is poverty. So that's the issue in front of COP, Ashwin. And I'm rather hopeful that for a long time we've talked about climate injustice, we've talked about the moral issue, we've talked about the need for financial assistance, which is at the scale that is needed. I see that conversation happening. Not enough, but I see it happening. My last point, and particularly because I'm surrounded by people who are part of the industry, and if I may, I think one of the biggest challenges that we will have as we go forward is not just what will happen at COP. And at COP, the issue of markets is going to be one of the key issues. The use of the carbon market to drive the transformation. Very important. But what we are seeing today is that the market is being misused, or the fact is that when it comes to clean energy technologies, whether it comes to providing people with biogas, with cook stoves, or with planting trees. We have just come out with a detailed investigation showing how the carbon market today, the voluntary carbon market today, is not good for people, it's not good for planet. It's not transparent, it is over-crediting in terms of the emission reduction, and there are no benefits going down to people and communities. Now, I say this because we don't have time to waste anymore. We need to make sure that we do not lose the confidence in the transformation that we need. And for that, we will have to make sure the rules of the game, both internationally as well as for private parties, are made so that they are fair and they're good for people and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita. And I think, the point you're raising about finance in general and the type of finance is such a critical question. There is a session later today on that theme. And I'm sure the question of carbon markets and what direction we're going will get further opined on there. Ahmed, I'd like to turn to you because your government has very ambitious plans in Egypt for expanding renewables generation. I think there's several gigawatts, including battery storage, in the making. And you launched, of course, you hosted COP27, Sharm el-Sheikh. You launched a major partnership, I think it's NUEFI, the nexus of food, water, and energy, with your minister there, who's a big advocate for it and is a member of our Global Leadership Council of Global Energy Alliance. So is the international community stepping up to support that plan in the way that Sunita is saying is required? Are you getting that kind of assistance and partnership, and are there lessons from your experience already that you can share with us?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Ashwin. And first, I would like to thank the ORF and the GIP for inviting me to participate in a very important session. And also, I would like to thank the government of India for hospitality and also for the full support and the good cooperation between India and Egypt. Let me say that Egypt started because, as you mentioned, NUEFI program is abbreviation of nexus between water, food, and energy, which is a very important sectors. And also NUEFI program, one of the very ambitious programs implemented now in Egypt to achieve our objectives to implement Paris Agreement. In fact, Egypt started its energy transition many years ago, specifically in 2016 when Egypt set a very ambitious strategy to achieve a very ambitious goal to implement or to reach 42% from renewable energy in our energy mix by 2035. We did a lot of work to achieve these goals. Especially in the field of renewable energy, we did a booming in the field of the renewable energy by implementing a huge capacities of renewable energies in solar and wind. Maybe Bimban Solar Power Park in Aswan with capacity of 1.5 gigawatt in one place in Aswan, one of these projects in cooperation between the governmental sector and the private sector, because Egypt now decided to stop all governmental projects and will give the rule for the private sector to achieve our goals and our objectives to achieve Paris Agreement. Also in the field of energy efficiency, we set a very ambitious goal to save 18% from our energy consumption by 2035, depending on the achievements of demand side and supply side. So we succeeded to reduce the fuel consumption to produce 1 kilowatt hour from electricity from 220 gram per kilowatt hour to be now 172 gram per kilowatt hour, which is a very success story for energy efficiency in Egypt. And also in the field of climate change file. Egypt organized COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, and also now we are the president of COP till next November to deliver the presidency to our friends and our brothers from United Arab Emirates. So Egypt is working and coordinating now with all partners all over the world to achieve the Paris Agreement. Now we are working also in the field of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a very ambitious target for Egypt. Now we are working to finalize our national strategy. Maybe within a couple of days or weeks, we will announce and we will launch our national strategy targeting that Egypt will be one of the pioneers for green hydrogen to share to share with 5 to 8% from green hydrogen production all over the world. And also we are working now with some of partners and private sectors to implement some of pilot projects in the field of green hydrogen. These projects under implementation now, the lands are already allocated and provided to the investors, and the investors now on the ground to assess and to analyze the data to start their projects. NOAF program is a very ambitious program, as I said, to replace 5 gigawatt from inefficient power plants, from gas turbine, fossil fuel, to be replaced by 10 gigawatt from renewable energy, wind and solar, targeting to reduce CO2 emission by 17 million tons annually, which is a very ambitious target. In cooperation with private sector, with a total investment with $10 billion to invest to implement this ambitious program. Now this program under implementation achieved many targets and many objectives in the previous time. We already decommissioned 2 power plants from 12 power plants already commissioned, and now we are working with all partners all over the world to secure the investments to implement 10 gigawatt, as I said, 3.7 gigawatt under implementation, already contracted, 3 gigawatt will be tendered, and 3.3 gigawatt will be allocated for green hydrogen projects in Egypt. Also, we are working to enhance and support our transmission grid to be capable to absorb the huge capacities of renewable energy. So we are working very hard on that. We will receive maybe around from 500 to 600 million euros to enhance our transmission grid. But frankly speaking, the work to enhance this grid will raise and will exceed maybe $2 or $3 billion to enforce our transmission grid. But now we already started our work, and I think after finishing and after concluding this project, it will be a very success story for all countries all over the world to launch and announce another projects and another programs to be a pioneer in the field of emission reduction all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very impressive to see what Egypt is doing as a sort of a pioneer in this space. And you mentioned a few times how important it is now that private sector comes into these projects. We heard yesterday, we're going to continue to talk about, we can't do this alone. We need all stakeholders to come together. And so, Venu, maybe I'm going to turn to you before Isabel on that. I mean, Hitachi as a company is doing remarkable things, whether it's on grid technologies, storage technologies, distributed renewables. And I imagine you're looking at all of this and thinking there's huge opportunities here to work on the energy access question, to work on energy transitions, but that you need to do these in what are probably quite complicated public-private partnerships. So tell us a little bit about how, from a large corporate like Hitachi, you're looking at this landscape, and what is the opportunity that you're most excited about?
Thank you, Ashwin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me here. The energy transition is very close to me personally and also for Hitachi Energy. At Hitachi Energy, we believe that we are the center of the energy transition. Why we say? Because our technologies enable connecting the large bulk renewable into the grid. Our technologies enable bringing the clean power thousands of kilometers away to the load centers. And our technologies also enable bringing the clean renewable power produced in the middle of the sea to the shore. So like that, our technologies also enable carbon neutral for the Indian Railways, for example, in that. So our technologies, be it the product, systems, services, and software, is the bridge between the generation and the consumption. So we play around the entire value chain of the energy, right from the generation through the consumption in that. So I always have been saying this, I want to repeat this, the challenge of the net zero and energy transition is so huge, is bigger than one individual, one organization, and if I say so, is bigger than even one country. What we need is the active collaboration. We must demolish the silo approach. We need a collaboration, co-creation of the technologies at the scale and the speed that is required for the transition. The challenge is that we have the legacy. The legacy is that the market is growing with a single digit. We have been always tuned to that. Today, the requirement for the energy transition is, it is a 3x or 4x. That is, we need to do 3 to 4 times what we have been doing it now in that. And how do we do that? We cannot do the same way what we have been doing it, right? And the GEAP and kind of organization bring these dialogues together, and I'm sure that some of these dialogues will turn into actionable points. And that's what is the biggest opportunity for all of us in the energy sector. Start with that.
Thank you, Venu. Thank you. Isabel, I'm going to turn to you. Really, the UN system, we ask a lot from it. You have 17 SDGs to cover, not just energy. Energy is one of those. But what I've been sensing is of late, UNDP and other UN agencies are looking at the question of energy poverty and energy access as more of a sort of a central driver to unleashing other SDGs as a sort of important part of how we as a society are going to advance. So how, from a UN and from a global cooperation perspective, are you looking at this? Are we making progress? Where do you see the biggest opportunities as now that we've passed the halfway point on SDGs?
Thank you, Ashwin. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting the UN system and UNDP to this dialogue. Yes, we are 2023. We just had the SDG summit at the GA. We are halfway through the Sustainable Development Agenda. And well, we are not making the progress we would like to make. And we have all committed. And I think the SDGs is not the agenda of the UN. It's the agenda, well, of all the UN member states, of all the governments, and most importantly, the people. And obviously, the private sector has an important role to play. And to go back to the 4 Ps from the distinguished ambassador of the United States in India, I would like to add the 5th one, which is part of the Sustainable Development Agenda, which is partnership. The partnership is at the center, obviously, if we want to achieve the SDGs. And SDG 7 has the goal to achieve access, universal access to clean energy for all. We all know we are not there yet. And it doesn't look good in terms of the target 2030. And as you said, this SDG 7 is central. It's an accelerator, an enabler for the whole Sustainable Development Agenda. So we all need to act together on this. Now, in terms of partnerships and in terms of the cooperation, we believe at the UN and that the North-South collaboration, but also the South-South collaboration is very crucial for these partnerships. And being in India and speaking as the UNDP Deputy Representative of UNDP in India, and working obviously very closely with the government of India, India plays a key role for both North-South and South-South cooperation. So obviously North-South is more the technology and the financing, and the South-South is the sharing of the best practices but also sharing maybe of challenges, failures that were made, and building a platform for exchange between countries, solar-rich countries of the global south. I would like to mention one specific initiative led by India. It's the International Solar Alliance, and UNDP is proud to be partnering with the government of India and the International Solar Alliance. I think this is just one example of this North-South and South-South collaboration in the bigger framework of the Sustainable Development Agenda and SDG 7. So this Solar Alliance is doing several key elements. One is facilitating the exchange of knowledge and expertise among solar-rich countries in the Global South through best practices, technologies. Second, it is collaborating with financial institutions to create affordable, and it was mentioned before, affordable financing mechanisms. It's a key element, and it's also a platform for technology transfer. Now, I would like to add one more point. It is important, obviously, that these practical solutions, they're open source and they can be adopted in other countries. But at the same time, and that's a key obstacle, I think it was also mentioned before, you need to build the capacity in these countries. And before coming to India 3 months ago, I was serving for UNDP in Burkina Faso, and I saw the important role which is played between the global south, actually, but it is not that easy to transfer all these technologies. I think the regulatory framework, it was mentioned before, is of key importance. The incentives through the government regulations, but then the capacity building. And other speakers have talked before also of the role of women and access to energy of women. That's a key challenge, I would say, and that's an element we obviously as the UN and as UNDP, we are focusing as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we are short on time, and so I had hoped that we'd have time for some questions from the audience, but I think we may have to pass on that. What I'm hearing is a lot of need for more cooperation, more trust, more dialogue, more risk-taking. It's a combination of technology, finance, policy, capacity. There's no one place that this sits. And so there is a temptation to think that working in partnerships, working in alliances slows us down. But I think we're realizing actually it's what speeds us up. Because without that, we're going to just get stuck in our own silo. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to wrap us up on a note of optimism. And you've got 10 seconds to think about it. And I want you to give me one thing, just one thing in a few words that you are most optimistic about when it comes to solving the energy access challenge that we face today. Who'd like to go first? There.
Thank you. Well, I'm very optimistic because climate change has given us this kick in the butt to actually start an energy transition that is necessary, is overdue. But if we can make it happen, sun is free for everyone, wind is free for everyone. If we can make the transition, we're going to be in a very good place in the years to come. So I'm very optimistic.
Wonderful. Ahmed.
I would like to say that this planet is owned by all of us, developing countries and developed countries. And the energy transition is a very good and a very ambitious concept. But we need to achieve the just energy transition. All of us has a specific rule, the rule of developed countries, and also the responsibility of developing countries to achieve the Paris Agreement. But we need to work together to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Sunita, what are you optimistic about?
So I'm most optimistic about the fact that we still are a democratic world, and that the voices of the poor are voices that count, that the enterprise of the poor are something that we are beginning to understand better. We are not looking down on their knowledge, we are beginning to incorporate their understanding of how to move ahead. The frugality of the poor is no longer seen as just poverty. And I think that is really something that we need to learn from as we move forward.
Wonderfully said. Venu.
Yeah, I am super optimistic, Ashwin. The energy transition, the more and more we discuss, a lot of discussions are happening, a lot of dialogues are getting into actionable items in that. The partnerships are building up in a real-time basis. And the good part is that the technologies are available for us to scale it up. That's a good part. While scaling up the existing technologies, we also need the new technologies to come in. The innovation has to come in, not only in the technology side, but the innovation has to come in the business model side. I think I'm super optimistic that this will happen. Thank you.
Wonderful. Isabel.
Obviously, I'm also optimistic. I'm optimistic because I think solar energy, as you all said, the technologies are there, and they have been also further decentralized at grassroots level. So we have democratization, if I may say, of the energy governance at the local level as well. However, the challenge is to transform that also in livelihoods. And that's linking to what I just said before. It is available, but how we transform it to livelihoods and to development of local economies and to reduction of poverty, that's a key element to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you, Isabel. You got away with a however because you ended on a high note. Well, I want to thank my panelists, and I asked them that question on optimism because I do think the spirit of these dialogues today and tomorrow is about looking to the future, looking to the opportunities, thinking about how we work more closely together, exploring the solutions and saying, how do we turn solutions into actual tipping points for change? And I want to end, maybe not on a somber note, but just on actually on a reflective note. A dear colleague and friend of many of ours, Dr. Salimul Haq, who passed away a few days ago, a noted climate activist. I bumped into him last at COP27. He was flopped in an armchair near the Resilience Hub, and I said to him, Salim bhai, you know, it's only my second COP and I'm exhausted. And he's turned to me and he said, you know, Ashwin, it's my 27th COP and I'm optimistic. Thank you.
On that note of optimism, thank you, panelists and moderator. Can I please request Sri Sanjeev Krishnan to come and deliver the closing remarks?
Good morning, everyone, and that was a fascinating panel. I'll keep my remarks short, the closing remarks. And I just want to talk about 5 things, and I'll keep them brief, as I said. The first one really, we spoke about during the panel, and again, you know, Sunita was very passionate about the comments that she made, and I think that we need that passion. We need that passion in this room to be able to deliver the outcomes that the optimism will like us to. But the first one from my standpoint, and we spoke about it, is financing. And we spoke about financing, and if we look at the public financing over the last few years, public financing for renewable energy has actually been going down over the years. So I know that there's a session later in the day about financing, but I'm sure you will want to discuss that in some more detail. Sunita made an impassioned plea about looking at financing in a different way, looking at different ways of financing, maybe grant and concessional finance as opposed to the typical equity methods and others. And I think that's a key issue for us because public financing has been going down. We know that we have been discussing the role of multilateral agencies and, you know, and how they finance, etc. But I think financing is going to be key. And again, if you look at it, also the financing which is happening, large part of the financing is actually going to a very few countries. So I think those are big issues because a large 80% of the financing is just going to about 20 countries. It's 80-20. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at. And, you know, I'm sure there will be discussions on that. And I think Sunita mentioned that. I think to me, the second issue, which sort of resonated with me, and in some ways, Per mentioned that issue, that it is not just about access, but it's also about demand. Now, let me tell you that there are paradoxes to be solved. So let me give you, and when I say paradoxes, what do I mean? You know, if we were to look at something like healthcare, which is very, very critical, right? I mean, if it is not there, then, you know, many of us will not be here. But do you know that if healthcare were a country, In terms of emissions, it will be the 4th largest country in the globe. And I think, when we talk about how we deliver healthcare, for instance, pharmaceutical, API, is hugely polluting, requires huge amount of water. So do hospitals, for instance. So how do we deliver some of the most critical services which are important for human existence is something which is very critical, and I would think that there ought to be some discussion on that. We discussed about demand, but I'm just trying to bring that issue to life as to what does demand to me mean. I think another issue which sort of resonated with me in a very big way was the whole thing about incentivization and disincentivization. So nobody spoke about disincentivization, but incentivization, we spoke about that we should have incentivization for renewable energy. Do you know, friends, that in 2022, there was $7 trillion which was spent as incentives for fossil fuels. So while we're talking about the money that is required for the green revolution that we wish to talk about, there is significant amount of money which is being given away as subsidies for fossil fuels even now. And by estimates that I've been reading, much less the 7 trillion is what is required on the renewable energy side for many of us to meet our aspirations. Again, a case in point, and I'm sure it'll get some debate and discussion. We did say that this was a moral issue, and that requires us to connect, and we need to sort of support each other. But again, there are few issues, and I raise a few issues only because these come up in my discussions very, very often. One issue really is on training and skill sets. How are we building training and skill sets for the people? When we speak to corporates, for instance, getting focus on people who are skilled on design, building, operating, and maintaining renewable energy plants is a vacuum. There is a vacuum out there. And many of the large players are now starting to set up skill schools by themselves. Again, it requires the whole of society response to make sure that this becomes common purpose and it is not only done by a few. And again, that when we say that it is a moral issue, yes, it is. It needs to be enabled. We do a lot of work on adaptation with WEF and others, and this is one of the issues that we have been picking up there as well. Two other issues we'll very quickly pick up, and then I should pause. I think another issue is the role that rules and regulations can play. And I just want to bring it to life with a very simple matter. This whole thing about net metering, and I'm sure many of you would have heard about it. We are saying that, okay, how can I, as an individual, solve for this complex problem? It is at the end of the day, we say that, okay, institutions will solve it, banks will solve it, multilaterals will solve it, governments will solve it. But if as an individual, I were to put a solar roof panel, what is in it for me? Or I'm being a responsible citizen. A regulation like net metering ensures that my net consumption, and we know that what we get commercially is obviously much more expensive. By a simple regulation like net metering, I'm actually able to benefit significantly, because what that means is that if I'm generating 80 units and I'm consuming 100, I have to pay only for 20 units at the commercial rate. I get benefit of the 80 units that I'm generating myself. And that is just, again, to bring to life the fact that some of the rules and regulations can actually play a big role in making sure that all of us, the whole of society, can actually contribute to this revolution that we wish to see. The final one that I would like to talk about is cooperation. And we talk about partnership. Isabel spoke about partnership during the course of our discussion. On the previous discussion, and I think that's important as well. Look at we don't need to look far actually. If you look at countries like Nepal and Bhutan, who are big on hydropower, and India, we are deficient at some level, and we need more energy. Again, we're sort of starting to get energy deficient, and the moment that you get energy deficient, our focus really obviously moves back to fossil fuels, because the capacity is taking time, and that's where the partnership comes in. If there are nations, if there are countries like Nepal and Bhutan who are big on hydropower, for instance, and actually the surplus available, which can be made available to us, that's something that we need to sort of do more of, and the partnerships become important. Likewise, the South African regional pool, for instance, and there are many other examples. So the partnerships also become very, very important. I think those are the 5 points that resonate with me the most. The one thing which I would also say, and I think it's critical, and again, that point came along, Venu was speaking about is the role of technology. I was giving you the example on pharmaceuticals, so let me just, and the healthcare industry, and let me just end with that example. I think we need to be able to use technology to create efficiency in the way we create outcomes. Just as when we speak about pharmaceuticals and healthcare, we say that, okay, there isn't enough money for R&D. Can we transform our businesses to enable more capital to be available to be spent on R&D? Likewise, we need to look inwards to say, what kind of efficiencies and transformation can this sector do to release capital, which we are all seeking, and which was one of the many points that were discussed in the previous panel. Thank you all, thank you friends, and I'm sure that we can all together play some role in making sure that over the period of time we get better and do much less of the fossil fuels and much more of the green fuels. And we do it not just because somebody individually is doing it, but we collectively are doing it. Last example I want to leave you with, when we talk about the ecosystem creation. Today, transport, and particularly two-wheelers and three-wheelers, are the largest end-use segment of energy use. Not just by doing transport and vehicles, it will not solve the problem. It will have to be the entire ecosystem coming together. And I think that's where our focus would need to be. Thank you, and have a good session.